The text came in while I was reviewing the final line item for a $42 million contract. No greeting, no explanation, just 8 words that detonated in my chest like a pipe bomb. Your role's been eliminated. Return your badge immediately. I stared at it, reread it, and laughed. Just once, sharp and bitter, because of course Brent couldn't even fire me like a human being. Not a call, not even an email, a damn text. 12 years of service, of building every major deal this company ever landed, and I get tossed like expired milk. I was still on the phone with the federal agency's contract officer. She was confirming the schedule for the signing, an automated logistics optimization package that had taken me 14 straight months of midnight revisions, compliance fire drills, and more procurement red tape than a Washington landfill. I smiled into the receiver, told her everything was moving forward as expected, and muted the call before my voice cracked. Brent thought he'd fired me, but what he really did was hit the detonator. Hey, real quick, if you're listening and find yourself gritting your teeth with me already, do me a favor, tap that like button and hit subscribe. Only takes a second, but it helps the team keep digging up stories like this. You'd be amazed how many bosses dig their own graves with a company phone and an ego the size of a Ford F-250. Okay, back to the fire. 12 years ago, I walked into that office wearing Payless pumps and a suit from a consignment store. No MBA, no daddy in procurement, just a chip on my shoulder and a brain wired for clause trees and agency language. I didn't climb ladders, I rewrote them. I became the girl they always trusted with the messy contracts, the stalled deals, the government agencies who couldn't even agree on their own acronyms. I didn't ask for spotlights. I just made sure the ink dried on time. And Brent? Brent was the type who updated his LinkedIn title from director to rainmaker without even blinking. Called every deal a collaboration, but never once opened the compliance appendices. He gave keynotes. I gave legal the footnotes that actually protected us. I kept us clean, audit-proof, and above federal scrutiny. But I wasn't loud. I didn't schmooze. And in Brent's world, if you didn't swing your ego like a golf club, you didn't count. Still, I played the long game. Smiled when he erased my name from the Q3 report. Nodded through meetings where he'd circle back to my work and present it as his team's joint effort. I watched him take credit for contracts I'd hand-delivered through 6 layers of government chaos. I watched the CEO slap his back and ask when we'd land our next big win. And I watched Brent look right at me, never seeing me. But I wasn't building that $42 million deal for glory. I was building it because it was mine. Not in the emotional sense, in the legal one. 6 months ago, after Brent started cutting me out of internal loops and floating ideas about outsourcing, I'd quietly formed an LLC, a personal consulting firm. Nothing flashy, just a name, a tax ID, and one very specific service designation, post-award federal compliance consulting. Then, when the opportunity came to write the draft contract for the logistics agency, the big one, I embedded something special in the compliance section. A subclause, Schedule G, a perfectly legal, fully vetted services appendix that gave my LLC exclusive authority to manage and receive post-award escrow disbursements. Brent skimmed it. Legal skimmed it. No one asked why the line items looked slightly different, why the recipient name didn't match the parent company's standard payment info, because in Brent's world, I was just the paperwork girl. Until that text. Until that moment, while I stared at the last clause of the last deal I would ever build for that man and smiled. Because the thing about paperwork, it always outlives the boss. Brent scheduled the victory dinner 3 days before the deal was even finalized. Sent a company-wide invite with the subject line, celebrating the biggest contract in our history, and a smug little note that read, "We did it, team. Drinks on me." I wasn't listed as a speaker. I wasn't even included in the event rundown. But I was still on the federal call that afternoon, walking the agency through the final amendments, smoothing over the last-minute panic about systems integrations. I just answered a question about data retention periods when my phone buzzed again. Same thread as before. Same coward. This time the message read, "Make sure you leave your badge with security. IT's been notified." That was it. 12 years. Dozens of contracts. 3 major DoD audits passed without incident. I was the reason we even had clearance to bid on half these logistics packages. And I didn't even rate a voicemail. I muted the call, stared at the message, and felt something split in my chest. But not grief. Not fear. It was silence. The kind that settles when you stop hoping someone's going to realize your worth and start remembering you already did. Brent must have thought he was being strategic. Quick cuts before the fiscal year end. He probably imagined himself telling the board how he'd streamlined ops and secured a $42 million win all in the same quarter. That's the thing about men like Brent. They treat people like software licenses. Useful until the price tag looks inconvenient. I didn't reply, didn't send a single word. Just locked my screen, walked over to the server interface, and uploaded one final document into the shared company folder titled final_execution_version_v9. It looked like every other file I'd sent over the past year, same naming convention, same metadata trail. But this version contained the last signature it needed. Mine. Under my LLC's operating authorization, listed in Schedule G, Section 12, Post-Award Escrow Management and Compliance Review to be facilitated by Redacted Consulting LLC. Registered agent, my full name, EIN on file. I hit upload, synced it to the compliance vault, marked it as final for agency release. Then I logged out of every internal system, email, intranet, contract repository, took a breath, stood up from my desk for the last time. Security didn't even look up when I handed over my badge. Just dropped it in a tray next to 3 others and told me to have a good evening. I walked out of that building into a warm October dusk, the kind that pretends summer isn't over yet. Brent's message had been cold, mechanical, but what he didn't realize, what he never bothered to check, was that my fingerprints were already locked into every vital artery of that contract. You don't spend over a year building something without knowing exactly where the veins run. He fired me mid-deal. I just made sure I took the deal with me. It started with Brent deleting my name from a slide deck. Q2 presentation. Government contracts update. I'd built the briefing packet, prepped the talking points, even wrote the damn jokes he used to lighten the mood. And when the deck went up on the big screen, my section, Contract Development and Compliance Architecture, was suddenly labeled Team Operations, Lead, Brent M. Like I'd never existed. Like he'd personally wrangled 14 months of red tape, rewrote procurement language by candlelight, and talked a half-dozen risk-averse federal officers into greenlighting our bid. I didn't say a word, just sat in the back, crossed my legs, and started planning. 2 days later, I registered Redacted Consulting LLC. Cost me $183.20 quiet minutes on the Secretary of State website. I didn't use my company email, didn't use my home address, just a neutral P.O. box, a clean EIN, and a scope of services so dry it'd put a compliance officer to sleep, federal contract lifecycle management and post-award oversight. See, I knew Brent, knew how he operated. Loud in the boardroom, lazy in the details. He wanted headlines and back pats. He didn't read footnotes, didn't touch appendices unless someone printed them in 18-point font and highlighted them in neon. Legal followed his lead, rubber stamps and automated approvals unless I flagged something personally. And I stopped flagging. Instead, I started writing. The deal we were landing, a $42 million logistics modernization program for a federal agency with notoriously strict compliance chains. They wanted automation, transparency, audit readiness, all the things I'd been building internally for years. So I designed the contract from the ground up, created every clause, every schedule, every attached exhibit, and in Schedule G, buried on page 198, beneath 3 pages of invoice formatting language, I included a small, unobtrusive section, 12.3, Post-Award Escrow Management. Post-award disbursements, oversight and schedule reconciliation to be managed by contracted third-party vendor. Redacted Consulting LLC, registered agent, my name, EIN and banking credentials on file with contracting officer. Authorization verified under FAR subsection X. Escrow release contingent upon compliance review sign-off by vendor. No one questioned it, because I was the paperwork girl. That's the part Brent never got. He thought being loud made him indispensable. He didn't realize that in federal contracts, the real power lives in the silence, the boring parts, the clauses no one reads until something catches fire. And by the time it does, it's already signed. I kept everything above board, disclosed what I needed to, logged every revision, cleared it all with the agency's compliance liaison, who never once batted an eye, because it looked exactly like every other vendor management protocol I'd written. And Brent was too busy rehearsing his TED Talk voice and asking interns if his signature should slant more CO-like. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even bitter. I was methodical, because if Brent was going to cut me out of the reward, I was going to make sure he didn't get the control. I didn't sabotage the deal. I finished it, exactly as written. The morning after I walked out, Brent fired the first confetti cannon. A company-wide email, subject line screaming, "We did it! $42 million secured," full of words like milestone and historic, dripping with his usual bravado. Paragraph after paragraph about leadership, vision, teamwork, everything but the woman who built it. He attached a picture of himself from the dinner I wasn't invited to, raising a glass like he'd just negotiated world peace. 15 minutes later, the company LinkedIn lit up, proud to announce our largest ever federal logistics contract. $42 million over 5 years, spearheaded by our very own Brent M., VP of Strategy. A carousel of corporate buzzwords followed, ending with a smiling Brent shaking hands with the CEO under an excellence banner we'd used back when I was still allowed in the photo ops. The CEO dropped 3 fire emojis in the comments. Brent liked his own post. I didn't click like. I didn't comment. I didn't rage scroll or draft a biting reply I'd never send. Instead, I logged into the federal contractor portal using a credential token Brent didn't know existed, because he never bothered to learn how federal systems actually worked. The login, tied to the contract's compliance representative. That was me. Once inside, I opened the disbursement module, uploaded the final execution version with the Schedule G appendix, attached the digitally signed compliance release form from Redacted Consulting LLC, and filled out the EFT routing fields. All fully compliant, all traceable, all exactly per federal protocol. There were no loopholes, no fraud, no tricks, just precision. You'd be amazed how few people actually read through Schedule G. Even fewer check who signs off on the compliance milestones when it's buried under 6 layers of login screens and government jargon. Brent didn't have the keys. IT didn't even know this section existed, because I'd built it that way, quietly, carefully, legally. I didn't steal anything. I fulfilled a line item no one else noticed. Once I hit submit, the screen blinked green. Payment release request submitted. Status: pending treasury processing. $42 million. Already on its way. I closed the tab, opened a fresh cup of coffee. Read Brent's email again, this time with amusement instead of nausea. Let him have his party. Let him raise his glass to a win he never earned. He still thought he was holding the contract. He hadn't realized I was the contract. Somewhere deep in a windowless treasury server, the final approval pinged into existence. Disbursement cleared. The contract, after 14 months of gestation, revision, redline battles, 3 pre-award audits, and 6 executive rewrites, was born. Fully executed. Fully compliant. Fully paid. And the money didn't go where Brent expected. Because the federal government doesn't do warm and fuzzy. They do process. They do signatures. They do protocol. And when Schedule G lists a vendor, Redacted Consulting LLC, as the designated recipient for escrow release and compliance reconciliation, that's who gets the wire. No phone call. No flag. No, are you sure? Just government machinery doing exactly what the contract told it to. The funds, $42,000,000 in clean, pre-cleared federal currency, landed silently in the account I'd opened under my LLC 5 months earlier. A nondescript institution. Business checking. Dual authentication lock. I got the notification at 3:42 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I didn't jump out of bed. Didn't scream or cry or dance like the third act of a soap opera. I just rolled over, looked at the alert, exhaled once, and went back to sleep. Because this wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. It was architecture. Every clause, every condition, every boring compliance paragraph Brent never skimmed because he thought the legal chick handled all the unsexy stuff. He didn't understand escrow, didn't understand FAR subsection X. He thought post-award meant after the photos. He thought once the contract was signed, the money showed up like magic and he could slap it on a slide deck and start pitching the next big thing to the board. The agency didn't even hesitate. From their side, the contract was executed perfectly. Milestones checked off. Signature blocks in place. Routing instructions valid. Vendor credentials authenticated. They didn't care what Brent posted on LinkedIn. They weren't reading the press release. They were reading the fine print. And the fine print told them exactly who to pay. And the best part? Brent didn't even realize anything was wrong. He probably slept like a king that night, dreaming about executive bonuses and yacht brochures, picturing himself holding court in some downtown steakhouse, waving around his federal deal like a set of Super Bowl tickets. He'd get to the office at 8:30, maybe 9 o'clock, coffee in hand, expecting a hero's welcome. He'd expect grins from accounting, champagne from legal, maybe a visit from the CEO, backslapping and fire emojing all the way down the hallway. He had no idea the money was already gone. Not stolen, not misrouted, not delayed, just fulfilled, exactly as written. To the letter. At 7:12 a.m. Monday morning, Brent's phone rang. The CFO never called Brent that early. They weren't exactly on the same brunch circuit. But today, her voice was clipped, borderline feral. Where's the 42 million? Not has it landed? Not are we cleared? Nope, she'd already checked. The bank account had a big fat zero under incoming wire transfers. Not pending, not delayed, just empty. Brent probably blinked a few times, mumbled something about treasury lag. I imagine he checked his email, reloaded the portal, maybe even walked down to accounting still in his victory lap mindset. Still coasting on fumes from that LinkedIn post where he called himself a visionary. Still smelling like cedarwood cologne and undeserved confidence. By 7:29, legal was involved. They didn't come in loud. They came in methodical, like a cold surgeon discovering the body on the table isn't responding to anesthesia. They pulled the contract archive, pulled every version of the PDF. They drilled straight into Schedule G and stared at a clause no one remembered approving. But there it was, plain as daylight. Redacted Consulting LLC. IN on file. Authorized compliance vendor. Escrow recipient. I'd attached the final signature form, time-stamped and digitally verified through the government's DocuSign equivalent. The contracting officer had approved it 3 business days ago. Federal funds don't move until every I is dotted. They were dotted. They were all dotted. Then came 7:48 a.m. The CEO stormed into Brent's office like a man walking into a bank robbery in progress. No greeting, just a bellow across the glass walls. Why the hell weren't we paid? From what I heard, Brent looked like someone had just told him gravity was optional. He went white, then pink, then full redneck crimson. Started talking in circles. Blamed the finance intern. Said maybe she uploaded the wrong invoice version. Said IT probably missed something in the firewall queue. At one point, he apparently said, and this is verbatim, maybe the treasury got hacked? No one was buying it. Not legal, not finance, and especially not the CEO, who was now rereading the boardroom Slack messages Brent had sent Friday, bragging about personally closing the biggest contract in company history. Messages filled with champagne emojis and first-person pronouns. I locked it down. I got us here. I made this happen. At 8:03 a.m. I got an email. Not from Brent. Not from legal. From a junior analyst on the ops team. A kid I'd mentored during her first compliance audit. Smart, quiet, too good for the place. The subject line just said, "Thought you'd want to see this." Attached were screenshots, internal emails, meeting invites titled, "Emergency Contract Review." One reply from legal simply said, "We're exposed. She has authorization." I read them slowly, sipped my coffee. Hazelnut roast, extra hot, no cream. Sunlight just starting to stretch through my apartment windows. Across town, Brent was probably pacing in those overpriced leather loafers, calling anyone who'd listen, scrambling for a lifeline. But me, I was just sitting with my inbox, reading proof that for the first time in 12 years, the silence I'd always worked in had finally become the loudest voice in the room. The call came in at 9:12 a.m. Unknown number, but I recognized the panic behind it before I even answered. "Where the hell is the money?" Brent barked, skipping hello entirely. His voice sounded like it had been dragged through gravel. I didn't say anything at first, just let the silence drag out long enough for him to hear himself breathing. "You can't do this," he snapped. "You're sabotaging the company." There it was. Not confusion, not regret, just blame, served cold and reflexive, like every other mess he'd dodged by pushing it onto someone quieter. I took another sip of coffee and finally said, calm as you like, "I didn't do anything outside the contract. Brent, you just didn't read it." He went quiet for a beat. Then the shift. Anger softened into desperation so fast it almost made me laugh. Okay. Look, maybe we misunderstood something, all right? Legal's reviewing it. But we need to fix this before the board finds out how bad it is. Just send the money over. Or at least, look, we can figure out a way to bring you back in as a vendor, all right? Full visibility. We'll make it right. I almost pitied him in that moment. Almost. But he still didn't get it. He still thought I was angling to come back. That I was waiting for permission to rejoin the party he threw after locking me out of the building. He thought this was leverage for a better seat at his table. So I corrected him. "I'm not coming back," I said. "But I am willing to license the post-award services back to you." He hesitated. "License what?" "The compliance structure," I replied. "The automated reconciliation logs. Access to Schedule G, per Clause 12.3. All the stuff you need to legally fulfill the agency's ongoing requirements." He exhaled, relieved. "Good. Yeah. Let's do that. What's your rate?" I smiled to myself. "Triple." "What?" "Triple the original scope," I said. "And a 6-month retainer up front. I've already got the paperwork. We can sign today." I let that hang there while he absorbed it. I could hear the gears grinding behind his silence, trying to do math, trying to spin this in a way that didn't make him look like a man who'd just been outmaneuvered by the paperwork girl he fired over text. "You're serious," he finally said. "As serious as a treasury audit." The truth was, I didn't need the deal. I'd already secured the payout. I had everything I needed. But I wanted him to look in the mirror and understand the gravity of what he'd done. Not the firing, not the cowardice, but the arrogance of believing his signature made him the author of something he never read. "Brent," I said calm and clean, "you signed it, you published it, you celebrated it." Another pause, this one longer. "You buried it in the contract," he muttered. "No," I corrected. "I filed it, in plain sight, in Schedule G. You just didn't care enough to look." He didn't hang up. He didn't curse me out. He just faded. The noise of him shrank until there was nothing but the sound of a man finally realizing he was no longer holding the pen. I ended the call, didn't smile, didn't gloat, just opened the licensing agreement, attached the new rates, and sent it to his inbox. Subject line, per Clause 12.3. That was leverage. Surgical. Precise. Like everything else I'd ever done for that company. Except this time, I did it for me. The emergency board meeting started at 10:04 a.m. and, according to the junior analysts still feeding me updates like breadcrumbs from the battlefield, it opened with the CEO slamming his hand so hard on the glass table that 3 department heads flinched. Brent tried to lead with a version of events that sounded vaguely technical. Something about contract ambiguity and unexpected routing irregularities. But he barely made it 6 sentences before legal slid a printed copy of the final contract across the table. Schedule G highlighted like a crime scene. Clause 12.3. Redacted Consulting LLC. Digitally signed. Time-stamped. IP-tracked. Authorized. By Brent. Because that's the thing about digital signatures. No one can pretend they didn't see it. Brent had been too lazy to open the appendix, too arrogant to delegate it properly, and too eager to slap his name on the cover page. So the metadata told the story he couldn't talk his way out of. The CEO read it twice, then looked up, dead calm, and asked, "So you gave full payment authority to a third-party vendor you didn't vet?" Brent opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. She buried it in the compliance stack. She submitted it to legal 6 weeks before the signing. One of the attorneys cut in, voice flat. "We flagged it. You marked it as approved in the routing tracker." "I didn't." "You did." She slid another page forward. Brent's initials, his timestamp, his Slack approval message. "Good to go." Looks standard. The board didn't yell. They didn't scream. They just went very still. That kind of corporate stillness that feels more lethal than any outburst. Like they were already calculating what part of the ship to throw him from, and whether it needed to be public or private. By noon, the PR lead had joined the meeting, because the agency's press office had just posted their own celebratory release, with Redacted Consulting LLC listed as the prime post-award partner. Competitors were already circling. I'd gotten 3 cryptic connection requests on LinkedIn by lunch. One was from a compliance lead at a rival logistics firm. Another was from someone at Lockheed who, last I checked, hadn't spoken to me since 2017. But the one that mattered, that came from the agency itself. Their internal contracting officer forwarded me a message. "We've got a sister division interested in a similar deal. Are you taking new clients?" I stared at it for a long time, not because I was shocked, but because that email felt like something I hadn't felt in a long time. Confirmation that I was never just part of the background. That the work had always spoken louder than the names they tried to shout over mine. I drafted a reply. "Happy to schedule a conversation. Availability open this week." That was it. No press release. No humble brag. No fireworks. I didn't want applause. I wanted clean air. Brent could keep the flames. The headlines. The pitying glances in the hallway. He was already being peeled from the org chart like dead skin. And me? I turned off my notifications, shut my laptop, and looked out the window of my home office. No logos, no slogan on the wall, just a second-hand desk and a view of trees in early fall. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore, just distance. And the knowledge that somewhere in a silent boardroom, every executive finally understood. The contract didn't get stolen. It went exactly where it was designed to go. The office was quiet. Not corporate quiet with HR posters and fake plants, but real quiet. Honest quiet. Just the soft click of a mechanical clock on the wall and the occasional hum of passing traffic 6 stories down. No branding. No slogan. No motivational canvas art telling me to hustle harder. Just a plain walnut desk, a notebook, and a window overlooking the rust-red canopy of October trees. I'd moved in last week. No grand opening. No announcement. No LinkedIn update. Just keys, a bank transfer, and a fresh stack of legal pads waiting to be filled. At 9:47 a.m., my new assistant, early 20s, sharp eyes, quiet like I used to be, knocked gently before stepping in. She had a tablet in hand. "Wires cleared," she said. "Full 42 million confirmed. Treasury just pinged it." I nodded, didn't grin, didn't exhale in relief. Just signed the service agreement sitting on the corner of my desk. The one for the second federal agency, the one that found me after the story made its rounds in contractor circles. They didn't ask for a pitch. Just said, "We'd like the deal structured your way." I slid the signed agreement back to her. "Send it," I said simply. She left without another word, and the door gave a soft click as it shut behind her. I sat there a moment longer, tracing the grain of the wood beneath my fingertips, letting the silence hold. 12 years ago, I would have sold a piece of my soul to sit in a room like this. Back then, I thought power came with titles and corner offices and seats at the table. I know better now. Power isn't being given a seat. Power is writing the agenda, framing the vote, controlling the signature line. Brent never figured that out. He thought I was a cost center, an invisible cog, a name in 8-point font at the end of a legal draft he never read. Just another line item. But I wasn't a line item. I wrote the lines and buried the ending in the footnotes.